Welcome to episode 7 of the Perspective podcast. Today is going to be a special one because we are delighted to be joined by royalty, should we say, giving him a compliment already. But here, Clive Tyldesley is here, the famous Clive Tyldesley. Clive, how are you doing?
Well, I've just noticed that the blind that I've drawn to keep the sun out, and this is the first we've seen of the sun this year in the UK, has rather demonically drawn a line across my face, which suggests I may suddenly be possessed. So if I start to grow horns or something during the course, the good thing is the sun will go in. We know that, and the line will disappear.
Oh, yeah.
But I do want to reassure everybody that I'm better than I look.
Oh, brilliant.
You're looking great, Clive, especially in your writing shirt. But also as well, I'm delighted to be joined by my friend Paddy Barkley, as usual. Paddy, how are you doing?
Well,
today?
I'm very well because Clive and I go back a long way. He won't remember this, but I do. It would have been about 1978 when Clive had gone to Radio City, Liverpool. Do you remember those days?
Yeah,
and in those days, we tended, all of the media I just started being a reporter, football writer for the Guardian, and we tended to travel with the teams. You know, the relations were still pretty good then between the press and the teams, and I, still feeling like a kid on Christmas morning, went to join the Liverpool party at Speke Airport for one of the trips away. And I think it might have been Benfica. I don't know if you remember that, Clive. I think it was away to Lisbon. And a trip to Lisbon to play Benfica. At any rate, I got there and the only spare seat on the bus was near the back with what appeared to be a work experience kid. Or a child that had won a prize, because this unfeasibly young looking reporter was sitting on the inside seat with his ewer. Ewers were the old, as Clive smiles in recognition, the old sort
Still got a sore shoulder from carrying.
Yeah, I know. and this boy who looked around 16 was there, and of course as soon as I met him and met the other people from the Mersey Mafia, as the press were called in those days, in that area, that I found out that he was a highly respected lead commentator for Radio City, and highly respected by the Liverpool players and management as well. But he just looked so young to me, and he still does. He still does. You know, it's amazing. I've got his book here, which is fantastic. A great title, not for me, Clive. Typically self-deprecating title. And look at him. I hate him. Look how young he looks on that cover. I absolutely hate him.
I did a commentary last weekend sitting next to Danny Mills.
Yeah.
And we were at Ellen Road. And I said, go on, Danny, who's the younger, Marcelo Bielsa or me? And I'm now in love with Danny Mills. I haven't broken it to my wife yet. He said, well, you? And I said, no. I said, I'm a year younger than Marcelo. I said, I am one of the only two commentators who can refer to him as the boy Bielsa. Martin Tyler and I.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Oh.
Anyway, definitely just a brief word about the book, although we will discuss it in detail as the show goes on. I think it's absolutely marvelous. It's typical Clive Tyldesley. It's got the very subtle opinions spiced all the way through the book. The fact that I agree with a lot of them is purely coincidental. It's absolutely great read. And the thing about it, if I may just briefly review it, is that and I don't know if Clive would agree with it, it's not so much it is part memoir and part tribute to Clive's friends. One of the great things that he as a top commentator could do, which I could never have done, was to become actually friendly personally with the greats of the game, and they're all there in the book. Dalglish. Clive, again, I do stress his sort of Peter Pan-ism, because he knew Bill Shankly. I briefly met Bill Shankly, but to know Bill Shankly as well as Dalglish Clough, we both grew up. Clive was much closer to Clough, but we both grew up with experience, unforgettable experience of Clough, and it all goes through this collection of friends that Clive has made along the way, right to the end. And I hope we'll round off with a prediction from Clive about one of his friends. His summer job, Gareth Southgate's summer job, is trying to win Euro 2020, and we're going to press him for a prediction as to how England will get on. But sorry, Omar, back to you.
Yeah, so we're still going to push Clive with a prediction, and the prediction we're going to push him on is the Champions League final, because we saw kind of almost a preview for it at the weekend. Chelsea winning 2-1 against Manchester City. Although Sergio Aguero was trying to be cheeky with his Panenka, it wasn't so cheeky, the end result. Clive, what did you make of that game in general? And does that open up, an opportunity for a more equal final on May the 29th?
Well, it's only a Panenka if it goes in.
Correct.
Very true.
Went in. It was actually, I don't know if you're aware of this, Omar. It was in a shootout to decide the European Championship final, and that was the decisive penalty. He walked forward with a chance to win Czechoslovakia, as it was then, a major European title, and did that. I mean, just before half-time in a Chelsea-Man City game that isn't quite the same jeopardy as there was on Antonin Panenka. But
in actual fact, what he did was an Ademola Lookman.
Yeah,
which is a very different.
I do think the Champions League final's got 0-0 written all over it, I'm afraid. I mean, both teams deserve to win their semi-finals, no doubt about that. I thought, actually, the Chelsea-PSG game was a really, really high standard. I thought right until the last 20 minutes of the second leg, when obviously PSG lost it and decided if they were going out, they were going to take a few with them.
Yeah.
I thought the actual standard of the football was very, very high. And looking back with the benefit of hindsight and seeing where Real Madrid and Barcelona are now, I think the rest were blessed by the fact that PSG drew Bayern in the quarterfinal. I think they were probably the two great dangers to the English Premier League clubs, and one of them had to go at that stage. It's interesting that the two semis were won really on the counter-attack. Chelsea had about 35% possession in the second leg against Real Madrid, and even Manchester City had a lesser share of possession than PSG in there. So unfortunately, we've got two counter-attacking teams in the final. What can't you do if you've got you can't counter-attack, because they're not going to let it happen. But thankfully, we have a saviour in the final, and his name is Pep Guardiola, and he will play Ederson up front or something like that. He will come up with a system that the world has never ever seen before. He sort of managed to keep his inner Guardiola in for much of the season and actually play a boring 4-3-3. But when he came up against Tuchel, he couldn't resist coming up with something totally different. What the heck it was. And I don't know. I actually think Manchester City have been a wonderful, wonderful credit to him, and indeed to the game over the course of the last year. They've been a delight to watch. I hope this isn't a double-edged compliment. I do think they are the best training ground team in the world. I think that while their football is beautiful, it's cool, it's technical. It's how they play on Thursday at Carrington in training. It's how they play in front of 90,000 if the win. Whereas Liverpool play with adrenaline and intensity and energy, and the fans are part of the experience. I think this has suited Manchester City, this whatever it is we've been watching for the last year. And I kind of hope that they play as they can. There's nothing against Chelsea or Thomas Tuchel, but in any sport, and I'm sure Paddy would agree with this, we like an upset, we like a surprise, we like an unseeded player going through to the last semi-final at Wimbledon. We like an amateur, in one of the last groups going out in the Open Championship, but we want the best player to win. And I think they're the best club team in the world at the moment.
And I think also as well with City this season, me and Paddy spoke about this on an earlier podcast, that it's been more of a collective responsibility we found rather than more individual brilliance. Obviously, they do have outstanding players. Ruben Diaz, I could just name one of them. He's my player of the year. as he is probably for many. But I think with City this season, you've seen more of the squad chipping in their equal matters.
I agree completely. And I think Ruben Dias is not an obvious footballer of the year. I think he's been really, really, really good. And he's made a big, big difference to City in an area of their team where they weren't very good last season. And presumably he's made John Stones look a little bit more like John Stones. But he is not Virgil van Dijk. I'm sorry.
No.
I mean, not in terms of the impact and influence that he had on an entire football club with his arrival. Ruben Dias has just been a huge upgrade on what they had there before. And I think it is difficult to pick a footballer of the year. And I think that is a great testimony. I've done quite a lot of work north of the border this season, and Rangers are the same. You can't, I mean, Rangers have been so dominant in Scottish football, but they've got like 4 or 5 different candidates for the Scottish footballer of the year. And that's a great credit to Manchester City.
100%.
Would it have been Tavernier if he hadn't got the? Yeah,
maybe. In a funny sort of way, I think actually the way that Goldson spoke after the verbal abuse that Glenn Kamara suffered, that for me just kind of raised him up to that kind of Van Dijk level. There is there's an aura, personality. It's a slightly old-fashioned concept that the leader in the dressing room. And if you hear guys, if you like, of our generation, for instance, Graham Souness talking about football, he sometimes gets pilloried as a bit of a dinosaur for talking about the responsibility that players used to take on their own back, those managers in the dressing room. But it is not, like so many concepts of the principles that we grew up with in communication and journalism, those things are not outdated. They just don't happen as much anymore. But the principles are as valid today. And if you come across a Connor Cody or a Jordan Henderson, I've actually written this in the book.
I know, I was just going to say.
Their qualities are that they speak. Oh, we really? Well, I can speak. We put Paddy and I on the field. We can't run. we can speak. And 21st century footballers don't speak.
No.
And that's a change which you have to kind of get used to. And that's where Ruben Dias isn't quite. He's not Vincent Kompany. It really isn't. Not that influence on everybody. I've written about Souness that I've never seen anybody influence the other 21 players on the field like Graham Souness did, because you needed him on your side, because he was going to kill you if you weren't, but he was going to lift you if you were. There aren't too many 21st century footballers like that.
No, every manager would say that and your theory in the book, as I remember it, is that it's to do with, we don't communicate using our voices so much because we're texting people because it's easier, or sending an email or something, so that the one-on-one communication, that's definitely a large part of it. Clive, do you think also that the concentration on micro coaching, you talked about Guardiola, do you think that's another factor?
Yeah.
Overcoaching?
I mean, again, as a commentator, and you and I as communicators of a certain age have to be careful that we don't date ourselves. And there are certain members of our brethren who, for me, were very, very good writers in their time, who are now blinkered and stubborn and old-fashioned and sound out of touch. And fortunately, I know I've got 4 guys in their 20s who are among my best friends, and they kind of hopefully keep my blinkers off and keep me thinking. But playing out from the back, I understand it. I completely understand why it happens. Better to have the ball than not have the ball. But I think there's some coaching snobbery going on out there. I think, Arsenal, it's just perilous. I'm sorry, you're not good enough to do it. If you get the players who can do it, fine. But don't kid yourself that you can do it with every time. This goal kick where the 2 centre-backs stand on either point of the 6-yard box and a pass is played to one of them. It doesn't, I cannot see the logic in it unless you've got the 2 best centre-backs in the world who can then play out. But if you can do that, cool. If you've got Edison who can chip a ball out to the fullback, then cool. But the perils of it, how many goals have been conceded as a result of playing out from the back this season, and how many have been scored? And then for me, all these stats that we stick on the screen, that's an important, and it's almost like one of those stats which nobody dare put up, because if you do, you look a bit of an idiot, really. You look like You look like you're just sort of saying, I want to be Jack Charlton and kick it in the... No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying every time you play it out from the back, there is massive risk. And football sport is all about... Coaching is all about percentages.
Yeah.
What you can and can't do. The expectation of actually succeeding with the plan that you've got.
Yeah.
And if you can't succeed with the plan, get another one.
I know. I mean, I support two teams, Dundee and Fulham, and Dundee certainly tried. I mean, obviously Fulham much better team and much more capable of actually playing successfully out from the back. But the football this season has got more boring as it's become less successful, and we deserve to go down. Dundee is completely different because the standard of player generally, Charlie Adam notwithstanding, is not quite as good as Fulham. What we tended to do is to try and play out from the back, and when the opposition refused to just drop the press, just because we wanted to do that, we then hit a terrible long ball instead of the goalie hitting a sensible long ball in the first place. And it was really comical to watch until, in mid-season we dropped it, completely dropped it, and now we've put an 8-game winning run and we're in the playoffs. So I do tend to agree with you that at every level, this fad, it's not a fad actually. When Guardiola does it, of course, it's not a fad, but it's not for me, Clive, as the phrase goes.
If I've said anything of any kind of sense in the book, I've actually quoted Roy Hodgson, who's a good friend.
Yeah.
Football is played from the first whistle to the last whistle. It is analysed from the last whistle back to the first whistle. You can't do that.
Yeah.
It's like reliving your entire life. It's sliding doors.
Yeah.
If you take a left turn when you're 18 years of age, the next 100 years all happen differently than if you've taken a right turn.
Yeah.
You can't just go back and pick one incident out of night. Football's random. The ball bounces, it hits things, it hits people. Referees decide not to give decisions. Yeah. We cannot analyze football like that. And it's this sort of, the whole world it plays a blame game now. Everybody's got, whatever happens in the world, somebody's got to be responsible for it, and somebody's got to answer for it.
Yeah.
So when a goal is scored, to go back 45 seconds and blame somebody who gave it away or took a wrong decision. No, you can't. We can't treat each other like that. You've got to understand the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is anything can happen on a football field.
Yeah. Both of you raised some really interesting points, actually, building up into my next topic, which is, because we've seen two English teams in the Champions League final, two quality sides that play a brand of football that we probably haven't really seen before 10 or 12 years ago. I know football has evolved, and also United in the Europa League final. So, Paddy, I will come to you first on this one. Oh. Do you think English football is at a level that we haven't seen before?
Well, not a domination level, not yet, because, both Clive and I, remember when, Nottingham Forest won it twice, and they in Aston Villa, and where it was almost boring. We are now, in my opinion, and I'd be interested in Clive's take on this, I think we're at a much more dangerous stage now, because we are at a stage where this can be baked into the system by the financial power of the English League.
Yeah.
And English Premier League, and I'm very concerned about it because I think it'll be boring. And not only that, there are obviously more malign brains across Europe who are concerned about it because they tried to choke off football. The likes of Inter, Milan, even Juventus, this club we've admired all our lives, turn out to be shabby philosophically and monetarily. So it is a genuine crisis that Florentino Perez and his mates tried to address in their way. And UEFA are trying to address in an equally wrong way. I'm very worried about the future of football because of the strength of English football. Teams will play their squad players against Real Madrid and Barcelona. I can honestly foresee that happening within the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely agree with everything. And it is a critical debate. And like so many critical debates, we're not having it.
Yeah.
And people have not seen the bigger picture here. Any argument you have, whether it's with your best mate, your wife, or with the rest of the world, you've got to try to see from the other side. Now, the Super League initiative was despicable in so many ways, but to ignore what they're saying, what Real Madrid and Juventus and Milan have been saying for ages, because they can't qualify for the Champions League, they're not good enough, and yet they still aspire to have the income that comes from the Champions League. That is their Premier League. If you look at that awful Forbes list of the 20 richest clubs in 10 of them are Premier League teams. We bloody well should have 3 Premier League teams. And by the way, they're not English teams, are they? They're foreign-owned teams full of foreign players. They just happen to be located in English cities at the moment. And if you had a European Super League, they could move overnight to Paris. You know, there were NFL teams 100%. That disappeared on the back of a truck. Or
drop the word European and have them in Wall Street. I mean, anything.
But the key to this is television money. And football is not worth what it was in television rights. And that is the danger that underlies all of this. I mean, there is a danger from clubs like Real Madrid trying to grab a more reliable share, a share on which they can build their business model, not a business model, but their business model. The danger is if the money's just not there. And what's happening, I've written about this in the book, and other people have seen this, but it's their voice is not loud enough, is that younger people consume their media in a completely different way, in smaller bites and for free if they possibly can. So they're not prepared to pay. The audience is getting smarter, so it doesn't just buy a subscription like we do a gym subscription in January, and by May we can't even remember where the gym is, but we still pay the money for a year. Now TV, or Now as they're now called, that's a good model where you can buy the match that you want to watch that particular day. But that is going to mean the pie is going to shrink, and the television rights are not going to support the business models that the likes of Real Madrid and Juventus, and indeed the foreign owners of those 6 English clubs want to carry on with. And the most telling comment in the whole European Super League debate was when Florentino Perez says, nobody's going to be able to buy Mbappe or Haaland. But as long as they don't go to the NBA, as long as they're playing football for somebody,
exactly,
we'll watch them because they're the best young footballers on the planet. But they don't have to play for you. You know, you're going to have to cut your cloth. You can't just go down the supermarket and hoard all the cloth because there's a pandemic coming. And now I've got it all. You're going to have to cut it and share it with other people. And I repeat, as long as Haaland or Mbappe are playing for somebody, I don't care. I just want to watch them.
No, it raises, Paddy touched on it earlier, that the future of the game and where it's going. Clive, are you particularly worried about the direction we're heading in? Because I know a lot has been made about everybody supporting this government-led review of backing the so-called 50+1 ownership. And that is, we had Kevin Miles on our previous episode. He's chairman of CEO of the Football Supporters Association. And he said this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity we have to actually implement a change at these, in terms of the ownership structures at football clubs. Are you particularly worried about then where the game is, what direction the game is heading towards? Do you think it's becoming too monopolized?
Well, I'm worried because of the word you just used, government. I didn't vote for this government, so I'm biased. I don't think they've got any idea of some kind of overview or plan to move football into the next part of the 21st century. 50+1, it sounds great. And the Bundesliga on many levels is very successful, but the same damn team wins it every year. It's not that great. And we are so far away from 50+1 with our current model that the revolution that would be needed to move from where we are now to 50+1 would take years. It would take people like the Glazers and Abramovich basically leaving our game and taking their toys with them, taking their money away. I mean, who are the popular owners in English football? Yeah, who is it everybody wants? I mean, is it Norwich? Is it, let's be Avenue? Well, fine, but you keep getting relegated. It's cool, and it's wonderful to see a family still invested in what is still one of England's probably largest 25 clubs. But if you want to bid for Mbappe or Haaland, you're going to need these people that you're campaigning against, or you're going to need to replace them with the devil that you know will definitely be better than them. And as I say, I think unless you are that journalist, that editorial seeker that Paddy and I were taught to be when I did have long hair and I'm sitting on that coach, unless you try to see it from the other side. And of course, at the moment, any kind of opinion which doesn't sort of go with the mainstream, with that gush of wave of, oh, FSA, let's do it, let's overturn, let's get the Glazers out, let's have 50+1 at Manchester. You can't even raise a voice against, well, wait a minute, they have spent as much money I know they borrowed the money essentially against the debt of Manchester United, but they have bought the kind of players you wanted. Is it 700 million net spend, something like that?
Yeah, second only to Man City.
Trophies and things. What do you want in place of that? Do you want to finish 12th in the league and have 50+1? Fine, on you go.
Do you still? You grew up as a Man United fan, and you tell a nice story about more than one nice story about growing up being a United fan and having been brought up in a very genteel family yourself, going with the Withenshaw lads to away games, turning into a real ruffian, and because you didn't want to stand out from the crowd, which I thought was lovely, and I recognise it. But will you, I can't imagine you ever will stop commentating, but if you ever did, would you go back? I mean, presumably you can't sort of go on, you can't support Manchester United in the way you did on those away trips.
I don't support them at all.
No,
it just left me. I'm not proud of that. And there are quite a few of my brethren commentators who remain as adamantly attached to their boyhood clubs, and I was home and away. It was the club my dad gave me. But as I try to explain in the book, once you're commentating on your mates, and particularly at the beginning of our career when we were the same age as the players, and they really were our pals. I mean, now all the people in all my contacts in football are managers. I hardly know any players at all. I'm old enough to be the grandfather of certain members of the England squad. So that connection's never going to happen. Plus the fact that they're a million miles removed from our world. Again, as I say in the book, you're never going to see your local team centre back in Sainsbury's anymore. They live on a completely different planet. So I've been fortunate to build these relationships, really kind of strong relationships with people in football that I really like. And people in football are not thick. Footballers are not thick. They're intelligent in not necessarily in an academic way, but they're so sharp and smart and bright. And they are great company. Not all, like most men, they're not great when you get 10 together, but individually they're fantastic company, and it's an absolute privilege to be. And they are my mates, and I know how much the game means to them and to their families and to to the way they live their lives. So and by the same token, that handful of managers who are just a pain to deal with, I want their teams to lose every single game. I just try not to reveal it.
And which brings us neatly to a manager that you speak very fondly of, actually, certainly more fondly than I would have done, and that's the greatest, in many people's opinion, greatest manager of all time, Sir Alex Ferguson. And you do give, again, with typical subtlety, you give a lovely insight into his personality when you talk about what he says at the end of an interview that's gone smoothly. In other words, you haven't asked him anything that annoys him. That when the interview's over, he says, "Well done, son." Because you haven't annoyed him.
Yeah, I mean,
lovely.
Gabriel Clark's a real foot in the door ripper, but a really good interviewer, and he hates that. He absolutely he feels like it's the biggest insult anybody can pay. And he always says Gabriel too for some reason. I'm never quite sure why.
So many people do that, don't they? Gabriel.
But I think there's an interview with Fergie, a post-match interview that I allude to in the book. They just lost 5 at Manchester City, and it was a live game, and Sky had it, and I was doing the highlights, and Claire Tomlinson was Sky's reporter in the tunnel then. And when I came down from the commentary position, obviously she was already in the tunnel area, and she said, "We're waiting for Kevin Keegan. If Fergie comes out, you can have him first," which, as I say, it's a bit like being told you're a crash test dummy, you know. See what kind of mood he's in. But he came out and he had 30 seconds rehearsed in his mind. He knew exactly what he wanted to say. And he knew enough about media to know that Match of the Day, or whatever I was working for, maybe it was the Premiership on ITV, we're only ever going to use 30 seconds. So he was going to give me that 30 seconds straight away. And I say, if I asked him, Alec, what's the capital of Ecuador? He would have given me that 30 seconds. And so consequently, once he'd given me the 30 seconds, the interview was over and he knew it. And I'm asking follow-up questions. But really, we're wasting each other's time. He has given me exactly what, on his terms, but exactly what I need. A 30-second clip, which sums up his anger of the way. And it was all about, I wish that I could bring the supporters into the dressing room and show these guys what a 5-goal defeat means to Manchester United. Done, finished. So, really, when you get to the end of the interview, it's on his terms anyway. So, well done. We got it done between us, didn't we? You know, you didn't ask me the question, and I gave you your answer.
Because he sees that as the purpose of an interview, to further his, just like a politician, I suppose. And you talk about intelligent. That Ferguson is an extraordinarily intelligent, remains a very
incredibly intelligent
man indeed by any standards. But he. Not easy to get on with. Yet you appear to have got a good a relationship of trust with him.
Yeah, he understood television, so he understood that most of the work that he did would be live. That halftime interview that he gave in the tunnel before the start of the second half Champions League games, he wasn't paid extra for that. That was a favour that he did, but it was also him using the fact that this was being watched by 15 million people. It was a fantastic opportunity. And even, his most favoured journalistic friends, Hugh McIlvanney, Glenn Gibbons, whoever it was, if he did an interview with them, he couldn't be sure that the nuance of what he said, of his quotes, would reach the pages of the Sunday Times or wherever it was. Whereas live, in an interview, broadcast interview, he knew that he could control the environment of the interview. And of course, the way he said it was as much a part of the message as what he said. And that brightness, that smartness, and that football intelligence, which again relates to the way that he managed Ryan Giggs and then the way he managed Cristiano Ronaldo, because we had to parent differently between those generations. Things change, and he moved with the times. And whilst the hairdryer was put away midway through his Manchester United career, he couldn't shout and yell at these millionaires. They just look at him and think, "Shut up, you old thing," under their breath. But that's what they think. So he had to manage differently, and that was the brilliance, really.
A classic case was a moment that I know meant a lot to your career as well, Clive. Was 1999 in Barcelona, the Europe Champions League final against Bayern Munich, and I think it was, I can't remember who told me, but apparently when the first goal went in, the equalizer, which was in the 91st minute, Steve McLaren immediately grabbed Fergie and said, "Right, now in extra time, what we do is this, we do that, we do that." And Ferguson almost pushed him bodily aside and says, "There's not going to be extra time. We're going to win." And the next thing that happens, you're uttering your famous commentary line as Solskjaer wins it. I mean, do you remember that almost ethereal 3 minutes? I mean, it was extraordinary, wasn't it? Was it a challenge for you as a commentator?
Yeah, I mean, it was a challenge in so much that it was such a big night for me, because the late great Brian Moore had retired after the World Cup final of 1998, and so that season was, I mean, it's a make or break. But if I'd messed up those 3 minutes, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. You know, that was my ultimate exam paper. But I think you concentrate on doing your job the best that you can at the time. It's only kind of when you're walking back to the hotel that you start to get an overview of what you've just witnessed. I mean, again, you'd be the same. You'd be bashing. I mean, were you working that night, Paddy? I mean, presumably you bashed
Luckily,
out a copy which was ready to go, and the treble didn't quite happen. And
Clive, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't work at pace. I was hopeless at working at pace. And luckily, or perhaps brainily, I made sure I was working for a Sunday paper that night.
Well, the finals on a Saturday night.
It is now. It would have completely buggered me up.
But that running copy, Omar. Honestly, when I came out as a fan of Manchester United as a boyhood fan in the 1970s, I'd come out at the final whistle, and there was a van out on the forecourt there, in front of what we used to call the scoreboard end, you know, where the statue of the three players is.
Yeah. And
it would be churning out a copy of The Pink, which was the evening paper, literally 10 minutes after the final whistle, with all the scores.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a match report, which the great David Meek he'd spend the whole game with a phone to his ear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember one game where United were leading 1-0 against Spurs, and Gilzean and Greaves both scored in the last 2 minutes of the game, and it was literally a paragraph at the bottom.
Or later
written all this wonder about Best and Law and Charlton, and then there's this little addition: 89 Greaves scores 1-1, 90 Gilzean 1-2. The headlines, you know, whatever.
I'm sure that, you know, one day a football writer will write his autobiography, and it'll be entitled "Later, However."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But actually, you talk about walking back from a commentary job to the hotel. It reminds me of what, in my opinion, is one of the funniest stories in the entire book, Not For Me, Clive, by Clive Tyldesley, is the story which you tell against yourself of swearing at Sir Bobby Robson. Now, no one does that, but you did, and I want you to tell the story.
Well, I mean, we've been privileged enough to meet some great men, and Sir Bobby Robson, quite apart from anything else, fought cancer. I've just lost a really good friend, Ray Clemens, in the last 6 months. He fought cancer for the best part of 20 years. Bobby was longer. He had about 5 bouts. He had I can't remember the name of the thing that he had in his mouth, which basically held his face together.
Yeah. Yep.
He managed about another 200 games having that after. So we are talking about an extraordinarily resilient man, a hugely popular man, which is very unusual in the tribal world of football, for anybody to be, I don't like his team, but I like him. Everybody loved Sir Bobby. Yeah. He was verbally crucified by a tabloid war between the Sun and the Mirror. Awful things written about him on the back page of the paper. And so this great man was part of our punditry team for Euro 2004. And about 3-4 weeks before the tournament, Ron Atkinson fell on his sword. He was my co-commentator. His use of the N-word is famous, albeit wasn't ever broadcast. It was, guilty as charged.
Yes, and he stood still down. A very, very sad story nonetheless.
Yeah, so we were looking for a co-commentator for, I think it was the second night of the tournament. ITV's opening night was England versus France. And so we had a former England manager who was part of our team, who was a good broadcaster, and who was loved by the entire nation. Only one choice. We'll bring Sir Bobby in. He was Bobby then, to sit alongside me. And Brian Barwick, who was my boss at the time, and I sat down. We had a couple of lunches with Bobby, taught it, listen, this is as important to us as manager, whatever a match was when you were loved that, got that, it's in my head. and we went up to the commentary position. I couldn't get a word out of him. It was an incredible game. England took the lead, missed a penalty. Zidane scored twice in the last 3 minutes to deny us. I mean, I commentated on my own, you know, and from time to time I'd sort of say, extraordinary move that, Bobby. Yeah, yes, it was. And he put it down again. And then, of course, what happens at the final whistle? We're down because Zidane's beaten us, as probably my favourite footballer. So we're walking down to the vans, and now Bobby's. And what we should have done is this. And when he burst forward, so quite literally, after listening to this for about 2 minutes and nodding my head, I just turned and said, "Bobby, it's no fucking good now." And he went really quiet, and we walked about another 30 strides together, saying nothing, because he realized that he hadn't produced. And then I said, "Hey," and I gave him a great big hug, and he was the most huggable man in the world. And we were fine, and he carried on talking, spieling about the game with great wisdom and insight and color. And where was that when we needed it?
That is
lovely
honestly,
story.
It is honestly one of the funniest stories I think I've ever heard, because I just can't imagine anybody swearing at Sir Bobby. He's meant to be the nicest man in football. But I was just going to go back quickly to, I know we spoke about the 99 commentary, Clive. I personally had, you know, other favourite moments from you: the Cristiano Ronaldo free kick against Arsenal in the Champions League semi-final, the Wayne Rooney in the injury time against AC Milan in 2007. Would you say, was the 1999 commentary the most difficult piece of commentary you've done in your career, or did you ever find a moment which was very tough to, you know, get the words out because it was so special?
I relate to the Panenka story that we told at the start. It wasn't difficult because it went in. Yeah. I got it right. I got the two names right, and I got the score right. I suppose it was a test. I've written about that and the 2005 Champions League final, which Liverpool eventually won on penalties. Yeah. In the kind of, say, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in fate. I believe in talent and actually tactics. You know, and I'm laughing about the fact that Johan Cruyff used to spit a piece of chewing gum across the halfway line before the kickoff because he felt that this was something he had to do. You know, some kind of ridiculous sort of play that he had to act out. No, Johan, you win games because you're better than everybody. Nothing to do with chewing gum. Nothing to do with Laurent Blanc kissing Barthez on the head. That's not why France won the World Cup. They won because they had the best players and the best coach. And it's, you know, sports psychologists must have a field day with anybody who believes in fate, because you can tell them anything you like, really. But there was an element of fate about both of those triumphs, and it went back weeks and months before, that you just feel, with our love for color, for a story, that fate is taking a hand on this. And of course, after the equaliser by Sheringham and the pause to think, which Reg Guttridge had taught me, I said name on the trophy, which in many ways was, you know, probably as anything I've ever said, I'm proud of, because that, wait a minute, this goal hasn't been scored now. It was scored months ago because somebody decided that this was going to be the year for Manchester United and indeed the year for Liverpool. And it is a magical fairy tale world that we report and commentate on. And when the fairy tale actually has got the happy ending and the whole story is written and it becomes a movie rather than a sporting event, it deserves the right words. It deserves, and those words are not necessarily pieces of poetry. They're actually pieces of editorial. They are the next morning's headline on the back of whatever, the Sun or the Mail, or whatever. If you can capture that at that moment, then I really think you've done your job.
I mean, does it come through research? I mean, does research ever? Because you're talking about that goal was scored, you know, on the training field or months ago. And do you find that, you know, copious research, you know, in other words, the harder you work, the luckier you get?
To a degree, and as long as you use research as an insurance. It's what you've got to do. But as I say in the book, anybody can do the research. How you use the research is the journalism, is the broadcast journalism. How and when you use the research, you never use. That's the key to me to bringing some journalism to the commentary. So the actual research can be dangerous, really, because you can almost get too much and you get carried away with it. And then, as I say, there are certain commentators who should have a little stream going across the said, "I've bloody well done this," so you're bloody well going to hear it. That's for me is not good commentary.
I know who you mean, and I think I do, and I mean, a very good commentator in some ways, but my God, I mean, someone who's constantly getting caught on the ball, which you never were. You never were caught doing a soyunchu, if I might put it that way. You weren't caught dwelling on the ball.
You only do it once. You should only do it once. It's going to happen. You're going to get caught. Stuff happens, and if you look down at your notes, you're not looking at the. I refer to commentary as a staring competition. Really, you shouldn't have notes in a sense. You should just be looking at the action, because the most attentive viewer. And that's the most attentive, not necessarily the typical viewer. Particularly today, the typical viewer's got 2 or 3 other screens on the go, but the most attentive viewer is watching the screen, watching the match, and so you've got to watch it for them, if you like, and keeping your eyes on the play, calling the game rather than. But the research is essential to any journalist in terms of a backdrop, a story, building it up. What's this about today? What's the story? That's where your research comes in. And if you look down and it's somebody's 100th goal or whatever, cool, fine. I actually, the Rooney goal against Arsenal, and review it almost at the anatomy of a piece of football commentary that I was pleased with, and then the lots that I wasn't pleased with. And actually, it's almost like a game whereby, he's going to be the youngest scorer in Premiership, was it Premier League then? I can't remember history if he scores. But when he scores the goal that he did in the 90th minute against a team that haven't lost for a year, then that can wait. The youngest Premiership goal scorer, to blurt that out as it goes in is to miss the fact that this is absolutely effing wonderful. This is a piece of theatre, and you go with that first. That's what you go with first. And then you can start to work the rest of it in later.
Well, this is something that, you raised some really interesting points there, Clive. I've spoken to this off air with Paddy as well. Something that really, really annoys me with punditry you kind of see these days is you can, I'm not going to name names, but you can kind of tell when somebody has done their research and when somebody hasn't done their research. I mean, I've seen people on television, on BBC Sports, Sky Sports News, admitting that they don't know enough about a particular story to give their details about it. But I always think, surely that's part of your job, isn't it? To do the research behind all these, topical events in football. And Paddy, we've spoken about this before. We were saying how much it gets on our nerves and stuff. I know Paddy has his opinions on it.
No, I was just thinking of the time when I was hired as a pundit, Clive. And I'll try and tell the story as quickly as I can. And this is a very good example of bad research. I used to, at one stage, I developed a habit of always going to the Africa Cup of Nations, and my God, some of the worst football I've ever seen in my life has been at that tournament. The players don't want to be there, the fans don't turn up because the ticket prices are too high, the pitches are like rutted fields. I mean, it's maybe a bit different now, but at that time, I'm not exaggerating, it was terrible. And because I went to these, a lot of these, the BBC, I think it was the BBC, got the idea that I would be a good person to have sitting next to their main pundit in the studio watching the game. So I was called in, and it was Stan Collymore. It was Stan and me. Now, I don't know how well you know Stan, Clive, but he is, apart from many other things, he is a professional to those fingertips. I mean, his research is incredible. And anyway, we were sat down. The game was, I don't know, Ghana against somebody, and Togo. Let's say it's Ghana against Togo. And Gary Imlach was the anchor man, and he says, he says to Stan, what do you think about this game today, Ghana against Togo? And Stan says, well, of course, Ghana have got so-and-so who plays for Hearts of Oak in Accra. And he, even though the league's not great there, I mean, for him to score 50 goals and 12 assists in a season tells you the quality of this guy. We're going to hear a lot more about him. And he goes on and on and on about, and of course, Ghana played 4-3-3, and then they switched to a 4-1-4-1. And he's going on about all of this, and I'm desperately trying to keep up. I have not bothered. I thought, well, I've covered the African Nations Cups. I'll just say what I think. Yeah. Anyway, we get to the end, and I haven't made too big a fool of myself because I've answered the questions very, very quickly, knowing that Gary can go straight back to Stan, and Stan can speak wonderfully. And I nearly got away with it. I could see the clock. The game had finished. It was 1-0 Ghana. And I'd managed to get away with these minimalist replies until he said, well, of course, Ghana's next game, and I can see I'm 15 seconds away. He says, Ghana's next game is against Ivory Coast. And of course, the Ivory Coast, well, we should really be looking forward to that one, because with their centre back plays for Accrington Stanley. And there was just enough time for me to say, does he? The credits rolled, and oh my God, and Stan was absolutely trying not to collapse on the floor with laughter. So that's my story about bad punditry. Sorry, Omar.
Oh, that was funny. Thank you for enlightening me, Paddy, on that funny story. But no, Clive, the past year has been difficult for everybody. Everybody's had to adjust to the conforms of lockdown and stuff. And I mean, it's been different for you as well. What has it been like in terms of actually taking the time and actually working on a story about yourself instead of, taking the time to actually focus on the commentary side of your everyday life?
Well, nobody watches this, do they? I can let you into a secret. Yeah, you wouldn't. I'll whisper it. It's been okay, really, the last year. I've been living in a house with my best friend, who is my wife. We got a couple of little businesses that we run from here. I can do all my research from here. I'm still been going to games where other people haven't been able to go to games. And I love writing. And I had, for the first time to write. So I'm healthy, and I'm having the second jab tomorrow.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think the difficulty really has been when you go out and work, is trying to put football in its place. And I've written about this. I managed to get enough sort of editorial time, sort of in, I think the final deadline was sort of towards the end of February. So my final reflections on this weird experience of continually saying how privileged I am to be here, and particularly as the fact I can park in the main car park and there's no other here. I can be from Old Trafford back to the M62 in 5 minutes, which usually when you buggers are here, it takes me an hour and a half. So it's actually been quite easy to work. I've had plenty of sort of work and income, and plenty of other things to do too. I think the Premier League do deserve credit for making it work.
Absolutely.
I think you could ask questions as to why they've gone to so much trouble to make it work. But I have heard some of my brethren getting almost sort of simpering in their glorification of this extraordinary event that it carries on night after night after night. And of course, some of those games are Burnley versus Crystal Palace. They're not all Paris Saint-Germain versus Manchester City. What I've written in the book is that of all the people broadcasting at the moment, the one who seems to be the most popular is Ali McCoist. And we've spent time with Ali, and if you were having this sort of fictitious supper party for 6 people you met in football, it'd be McCoy's +5. He'd definitely be there. So he is this hugely warm and interesting and humorous man, and a lot of that passion and stuff comes out. He's very, very well qualified to be a football pundit because he's managed Rangers and so on. He played at the very, very highest level. But his real skill is he sees football from the punter's point of view.
Yeah.
It's because he spends time with punters, with football fans. And so this wonderful comment of Jurgen Klopp that this is the most important of the least important things.
Yeah.
He's got that. And so there isn't this rather austere, I don't know, or grave praise for this show which rolls on and on. It's actually still football, but it's not quite. We're missing you. As soon as it's over, they all come back. And by the way, even more important, he sees that people have died, and people have lost their jobs. And actually, he gets that too. So the warmth is there, and the understanding and the human touch is there. And that's what makes him so popular at the moment. So what have I tried to do in the last year? I've tried to be a bit like Ali. And I think that's, it's very important. Again, it comes back to the stuff that Reg taught me, editorializing, trying to put the story in its place. And I'm afraid I can't remember the FA Cup final. I can't. What's the most memorable game I've seen, in the last year since lockdown? Beats me.
Yeah.
Next interview.
That's a pretty good steer as to
we got 10 minutes. BBC breakfast, sorry.
Well, I don't know if we've got time then to tell this story of because a great theme of the book is your love of footballers and football humor, and you tell that absolutely evil story about what Hansen and Dalglish did.
I'm a bit nervous about that because I wasn't there, and and actually you're a good journalist, and second-hand stories are always, and I've heard the story told in different. I know it happened, but I've heard it told in different views. But quite early in the process of writing the book, I sent the chapter to Kelly Cates, who is Kenny's daughter,
She was
who is a wonderful broadcaster. Talk about somebody who gets it. Kelly Cates is right there with Adam McCoy. She's got the tone, the pitch, absolutely right for the time we've gone through. And she kind of loves the story, so it must be true. So this actually tells you, and what I've tried to say in the book is that Kenny Dalglish is now Sir Kenny Dalglish. Sorry, he's still Kenny to me. Is a director at Liverpool. And with that responsibility comes the duty of care to young footballers and so on that goes with that. And Kenny would be the first person to condemn what he did back in 1927. And times do change. And I've written a lot about historical judgments of events in the book. It's dangerous ground judging something which happened a long, long time ago from today's perspective. So Kenny is hugely responsible. And in the wake of the Hillsborough tragedy, he and Marina were immense, just the most adult human beings on the entire planet. But he had the most childish sense of humor. And football humor is dark. Football banter gets sharp. It gets dangerous, very dangerous by today's standards. And if footballers can wind each other up, it's worth more than three. However much they want to win on a Saturday afternoon, if they can pull a stunt which hangs out to dry one of their own, one of the very best friends in the world, then it's a much, much bigger victory than winning at Manchester United. So Steve Nicol was one of the young, bright things coming through in the Liverpool team, and was very, very popular. He's gone on to be quite a successful coach in America. Everybody loved Nico. But Dalglish and Hansen, when they got together, were, sinister, really, in the tricks that they would play. So Kenny Dalglish suffered, we're talking about the best footballer in Britain at the time. He suffered a broken cheekbone midway through a season. Took him some time to come back. And when he came back, he wasn't quite himself, not quite at the level that we expect of him. And Alan Hansen told Steve Nicol, who worshipped Kenny, that don't you? And Steve Nicol said, no. Oh, okay, just leave it with me. So they hatched this plan that Dalglish would go into his bed, draw the curtains, and the joke was he's dying. That was the guffaw. So Steve Nicol was brought in to pay his last respects to this man that he idolizes and loves. And Dalglish is playing up, lying in the bed. Yeah, I thought you'd have, and Handsome, it went into his brain. And telling this terrible story. And of course, the great payoff, which makes it tellable now, is poor Nicol now is crying that Kenny is speaking to one of his heroes for the last time. And Kenny says to him, "Didn't you realise?" And Steve Nichols says, "Well, I knew you were playing bad, but..." And which Hanson bursts into laughter and Dalglish throws something at him. But that was wonderful. Then. And you wouldn't do that now. You really wouldn't do that.
No, it would be bullying or something. But
it would, and it is bullying. It is terrible. There is no cause to reduce somebody to tears. And,
but that was the way. That was the way
that was the school then. And,
a very hard school.
Yeah,
they used to throw Christians to the lions. I mean, are we going to condemn every Italian citizen forever and a day? I understand the concern over an awful lot of practices that Paddy and I grew up with, and we're concerned about them.
Yeah,
and some of them I'm concerned that I lived through and didn't react differently to the way that I did. But judgment is different from reflection.
Yes.
And there is far too... I've been on the planet now for 133 years, and this has been the most uncertain year of all of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there is so much certainty around. Yeah. There are so many people who are sure that their view of the world is absolutely right.
Yeah.
And as I've written, you're either with me or you're an infidel. And if you're an infidel, then you will be cast off. And I will judge you, and I'll get lots of other people judge you, and I'll run you out of here. That's not being a human being on this planet.
Well, I'm tempted to leave it there because I don't think there'll be a more important message delivered anywhere today than that. And I just wish it were more recognized.
It's up to you, Omar. You're the future, mate. We're nearly done.
Yes.
If somebody brings you to either of our bedsides and tell you we're actually dying, it's not a gag. We're going. Yeah. Now we're out of here. So, so don't be saying, I knew your writing was crap or anything like that. Just give us some sympathy. But it's up to you. You're the future of communication. And communication is so important in this. The journalists have got to get this right, and they've got to tell the whole story. And then people can hopefully form a better impression than they do.
Yes. Well, the thing is that, and it does pertain to a part of your story, Clive, and that we were speaking before you came to join us. And one thing I asked Omar was talking about the generational thing. And I said, where does Clive stand? And he said, as one of the very best of all, if not the best, I think you said. So, and I said, but do broadcasters have to bring younger people in? Omar's 22. He just wants the bet. It's patronizing to young people to say, and Omar agreed with me on this. It's patronizing to young people to say they want people of their own age. They just want the best. They don't care what age, what gender, what, ethnicity. They just want the best. That's all that matters. Am I right, Omar?
Yeah. I mean, touching upon the podcast we have at the moment, I think there's about a 50-year age difference between me and Paddy, and me and Paddy are such good friends. Well,
I'm not going to tell you which way, but you're right.
But yeah, from my point of view, I just think, you've taken the words out of my mouth, Paddy. We touched upon this earlier, and Paddy asked me who my favorite commentator was, and I did say you because of the 99 moment and my affiliations with football clubs and so on. But I just think
99 was 22 years ago. You're 22.
I know, but
I reach a younger audience than I realized. Bye-bye, I've got to go.
Okay. Yeah, get out while you're winning. Clive, thank you very, very much. And really so sorry to have taken up, put you right up against your next interview.
I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. It's great to speak. Let's keep in touch.
Yes.
Anything you want at all, I might just shout out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clive.
Bye-bye.
Really
thank you, Clive. All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.